Vatican intervention seemed to have been effective in saving a number of these unfortunate persons. Hence, in our opinion, a close connection exists between the Nazi roundup in Rome and the existence of a rescue network involving the Vatican. This is true even for another reason, the importance of figures, the importance of a number factor. Professor X is going to give plenty of details in this regard soon after my presentation, so I should limit my remarks to the following. Maybe on 16 October 1943, Roman Jews were approximately 10,000. Unfortunately, more than 1,000 of them were deported to the extermination camps. But the real question is, what about the majority of Roman Jews who avoided the Nazi roundup? Where did they go? Who took care of them? Who hid them? In conclusion, documentary evidence shows that in the so-called pious question, oversimplification is not allowed. Firstly, many documents about Pacelli's historical wartime role do not come from the Vatican, but from other sources with no propious apologetic agendas. Secondly, the rescue networks involving the Vatican in a leading or co-leading role were not simply Catholic, but rather interfaith, lay, and religious organizations. Thirdly, documents coming from Jewish agencies have already made clear the complexity of the wartime game involving the Vatican and Pope Pius XII. Anyway, the next opening of the Vatican archives on Pius XII will provide us with new tools for fine-tuning some interesting historical points. If a conclusion is possible for my brief presentation, this is the following. If remembrance is insecure, so is civilization. Remembrance does not depend from a calendar. It can and must evolve into a biography of mankind. Thank you very much.
Professor, I thank you for your presentation and for laying before us the concrete steps within the rescue networks. This is it's very interesting to see, and the concrete contribution of the Church in that regard. Our next speaker is Professor Limori Aghil, a French Jewish professor at the University of Sorbonne, special advisor to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem and the Holocaust Memorial in Washington. She will speak to us today in French about the role of the Catholic Church in France leading up to and during World War II, the efforts of leaders of the Church in France to save Jews, and the direct ties they had with the Vatican. Now, if you do not speak French, I would turn your attention to simultaneous translation through these air shells. You should also see in front of you on the little screen, turn to, if I'm not mistaken, channel 1, which will then give you the English translation. So a little pause while everyone gets their translations ready. Professor, welcome amongst us.
First of all, I would like to say I'm very honored by the invitation. And I would like to present briefly my conclusions. France is one of the occupied countries of Western Europe where the Jewish community best survived extermination after Italy. Whilst 3/4 of Jews from the Netherlands were taken away to extermination camps, it was only, if we may dare to say so, 1/4 of Jews in France, that is 75,000 Jews, who were deported. And more than 220,000 Jews survived in France. What was the contribution of bishops, priests, and Catholic religious women in saving them? Were these bishops supported in their activity by the Vatican? What are their links with Pope Pius XII? According to our studies, there were more than 45. I have the mic. Can you hear me now? Can they hear now? According to our studies, there were more than 45 bishops out of the 80 who, within their dioceses, who encouraged the placing of Jews within religious congregations, boarding schools, so-called free schools, and who supported the initiatives of priests and religious, the activities of placing Jews in host families, or to help to get them to Switzerland or to Spain, to provide them with false documentation or falsified baptismal certificates. The bishops were completely aware of these different support initiatives, but publicly they preferred to affirm their respect for the established power and their fidelity to Maréchal Pétain, the victor of Verdun. Each bishop reacted according to his character and personal style. There were no instructions given on how to come to the assistance of Jews in the eternal publications of the Church of that time. It was really an underground undertaking, made possible by people's goodwill and the network of personal friendships. Quite the spider's web was weaved and spreading out with the aim of saving human lives. Faced with the violent persecution of Jews in Paris in July 1942, there was a series of public protestations made by some 6 bishops and cardinals. Saliège in Toulouse, Théas, Cardinal Gerlier in Lyon, Delay in Marseille, followed by the bishops of Albi and Bayonne. We must also add the Bishop of Puy-en-Velay, Bishop Martin, who published a letter to be read from the pulpit in all the parishes of his diocese in October 42 on the necessity of the principle of charity and of the duty to come to the assistance of Jews. Let us note that the Bishop of Clermont and the Bishop of Nice both remained silent from 1940 to 1944, but at the same time they acted in a discreet way, showing support for the many rescue initiatives in their respective dioceses. Their contribution in rescuing Jewish people was recognized by Yad Vashem in Israel, and both of them received the Medal of Righteous Among Nations. These 2 examples show that one was able to remain quiet, silent, and meanwhile help Jews in a discreet manner. This was the case for many bishops, both in the free zone and in the occupied territory. Faced with the suffering of Jews, bishops generally supported the different actions of assistance and encouraged their priests and religious personnel to disobey the aforementioned established power and come to the help of Jews. France, considered as the eldest daughter of the Church, placed at the disposal of Jewish people its powerful and vast network of convents, religious colleges, in the hearts of the towns and rural locations. How to explain this attitude? Firstly, we note that a good number of these bishops who saved Jews were faithful to the position of the Vatican from the 1930s. After the condemnation of French action by the Vatican in 1926, some 39 dioceses saw a change of bishop. These different nominations aligned themselves perfectly with the episcopal policy of Pope Pius XI, the promotion of Catholic action, combating nationalism, and the French Action Movement, and combating Nazism and racism. In the second place, the Pope's special interest for episcopal nominations in France. Responsible for the nomination of bishops in France, Pacelli had a special relationship with several bishops who in the years that followed would set up numerous initiatives in their dioceses to come to the help of Jews. In the third place, the renewal of Catholic thought and publications against Nazism in printed newspapers and magazines. The 14th of March 1937, we have Pius XI publishing his famous encyclical Mit brennende Sorge, which denounced the doctrinal errors of Nazism. This text resonated so much in France that even after defeat, many Catholics would qualify this as the fundamental pontifical document against the ideological poison of Nazism. Numerous bishops and priests and other Catholics who chose to carry out illegal activities to rescue Jews made specific mention of this encyclical to justify such actions. Some bishops we could mention who are never generally mentioned. For example, Bishop Léon Augustin Cesbron, the Bishop of Annecy, who chose to adopt a prudent position. Following the roundups of the summer of 1942, it was because of his direct intervention that many convents, boarding schools, with the support of some 35 priests, helped to save more than 700 Jewish families. Rastouille, Bishop of Limoges, totally disapproved of the measures taken by the Vichy government with regard to the Jews. He found such measures barbarous and inhuman, and above all, contrary to the doctrine of charity and mutual support of the Catholic Church. Rastouille founded a local section of Christian friendship and was thus able to organize chains of dissimulation and escape routes, notably towards Switzerland, and thereby to save many human lives. This was possible because he had real support from the Vatican and was in no way afraid of being pushed aside from the hierarchy. Money was sent to help Spanish refugees first, and then Jews in the Limousin region. The Bishop of Rodez in the Aveyron, a part of France, particularly attached to the Catholic faith, enjoyed great influence over the population of his diocese. Thanks to his help, several Jews were given hospitality in convents, religious congregations, and more than 80 Jewish children were hidden in the boarding school of the Sisters of Our Lady of Massip in Cap de Nac, in the very same place where the Bishop of Toulouse would send Jewish people to hide. In Paris, Cardinal Suard had taken a very clear position with regard to National Socialism well before 1940. Following the raids, the Cardinal gave instructions for the clandestine welcoming of many Jews. It's estimated that more than 700 Catholic families of the Parisian region welcomed children or indeed Jewish families, and a significant number of priests and sisters were engaged in these mutual help activities, amongst whom Father Michel Riquet, the Sisters of Zion, the Dominican Sisters, the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, and so on. In 1943, Cardinal Suard went to Rome to meet Pope Pius XII. Following his meetings and thanks to his discreet interventions, and indeed based on the decisions made by the Pope, many Jews were able to leave and find refuge in Italy. Overall, it can be noted that Catholic religious showed genuine will to save human lives, which was matched very often by their spiritual resistance to Nazism. There wasn't a wish to convert children, but essentially the desire to protect them from the potential risk of arrest and deportation. According to Father Henri de Lubac, the efforts on the part of priests to assist Jews in France were regularly encouraged by Pius XII. It's worth noting that many of these had been formed in their younger days in the Catholic Action Movement of the 1930s and were faithful disciples of the vision and policies of Pius XI. The influence of the Vatican in France is particularly important. We've already mentioned the 1937 encyclical. Then in 1938, the famous Pius XI Declaration. Anti-Semitism is unacceptable. We are all spiritually Semites, a message which was broadcast all over France. The first encyclical letter of Pope Pius XII, Summi Pontificatus, 20 October 1939, denounced all forms of racism. Such declarations confirmed the interest of the Pope for all forms of spiritual resistance and of combating Nazism and racism. The Vatican spared no effort in bringing help to the victims of the Spanish Civil War, then the victims from the Second World War. The Pope sent important donations to Spanish refugees in 1939 and in 1940, and then again to Jews who were held in internment camps in France between 1939 and 1942, and in particular with the help of Verdier in Paris, his successor Suard, Rastouille in Limoges, and then Saliège in Toulouse. Pius XII sent money for Israelites held in the camp in Gours. In 1941, the Vatican sent 1 million francs to the auxiliary bishop of Toulouse to assist with the work of the chaplains working in the internment camps in the southwest. Thanks to the work of Fathers Lagarde and Braun, who distribute the money from the Holy See, to assist those who are held captive. 8th of March 1942, you have the citation. The Holy Father sends money to relieve the suffering of those in camps, 200,000, and then more important gifts. Several million was given by the Vatican with a view to helping Jews in the southwest either get out, move on, move instead to centres of hospitality in Vendine or Our Lady of Massip in Cap d'Anac. 3 bishops therefore gave logistical support to convents and holiday camps in order to hide Jewish people, the bishops of Toulouse, Rodez and Auch in the Gers. The Vatican had the same attitude in the Limousin region, thanks to the good offices of the bishop and his Catholic network, particularly faithful to the Vatican. Thanks to the Bishop Louis Fillon, who used his sermons to criticize the politics of Nazi Germany and encourage his priests to support Jews. On the 3rd of July 1942, a very important citation the project relating to the help of the Pope for foreigners residing in France. A group of charitable works working in Limoges. Bishop Rastoui is very faithful to the policies of the Vatican, and he decides as best he can to distribute the charitable work as willed by the Holy Father. 23rd of April 42, a letter from Father Victor Vermont, brother of Father Alexandre Glasbert, speaks of important sums of money which was sent to both via the Bishop of Lyon and in a welcome centre in the Gers. Another short letter from Courrèges in Toulouse, informing the Vatican of the situation of Jews hidden in the house in Vendine, where a certain Miss Louise Tebb was taking care of them by placing them in holiday camps for needy children. In brief, Pius XII closely followed the situation of those held in internment camps, as well as the situation of Jews placed in convents, religious institutions, holiday camps and welcome centres. She's talking about now the occupation of Marseille and the work of Father Pierre-Marie Benoit, as well as the work of Mr. Angelo Donati, the director of the Crédit Franco-Italian Bank. And with this help, we were able to evacuate more than 50,000 Jews from France to Italy. It's estimated then that the Vatican took a special interest in these refugees in France and in particular of the Jews. And that they would do. Sir Pius XII was fully aware of the situation, wanting to trust the French bishops. He knew that they would do what was needed to come to the help of the Jews. £4 million, which was sent to essentially benefit the Jewish community in Limoges, Marseille, Poitiers. All of that shows the wide and powerful network which was put in place. I'd like to note as well the money sent by the grants from the Vatican in favour of Secours Catholique, the French version of Caritas, which helped the support of the Jews. According to certain researchers, we can count around 800,000 Jews throughout the whole world saved by Pius XII, of whom 200,000 in France alone, thanks to the orders received to hide them in religious institutions. Whilst precise orders have not been found and probably never will be, it's clear that the bishops in France, at least those studied during our research, had known Pius XII for a long time and followed his policy and directions with regard to Nazism, and they also enjoyed an autonomy of action, allowing them to take initiatives at the local level whilst remaining faithful to the established political regime. Thank you for your interest and attention.
Professor, our gratitude for your presentation, for bringing to our attention and highlighting these very concrete engagement between the Vatican and the French bishops and the Church in France to come to the aid and assistance of the Jews during the Second World War. Our next speaker is Professor Johann Nix, who is Director of the Historical Archives for the Holy See's Section for Relations with States in the Vatican. He is formerly Professor and Chair of Archival Sciences at the European University in Rome and the author of several works on World War II and the Vatican, The Secrets of Holy See Diplomacy, and Pope Pius XII and the Resistance Movement in Rome. He will speak to us about the efforts of Pope Pius XII and the Church to save Roman Jews, and give us as well an introduction to the archives that will open on March 2nd. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Monsignor Hansen. In 2017, I was invited in Rome for the Joint Congress of Refugee Politics of the Holocaust Remembers Alliance, and on that occasion was published in 2018. It focused on what happened to the Jewish population of Rome based upon Jewish testimonies and evidence produced by those who helped to save them. Actually, the discussion on the raid by the Nazis in Rome on 16th of October is an ongoing discussion, mostly between the Italian Procaccia and the Belgian deacon Dominic Oversteins, which includes statistics from various archives and witness testimonies. For other reasons than being also a Belgian myself, I give more credit to the results produced by the investigations by Oversteins. So what do we actually know today about the Roman raid, and what are the minimal numbers that we can share today on it? 1 minute before 5 o'clock in the morning of 16 October 43, a total of 8,207 Jews were present in Rome. A total of 1,323 Jews left their houses before that 16th October, and many were undoubtedly helped and given assistance by Pius XII and his staff at the Secretary of State and the individuals of the escape line in Rome. We have a verified number of Jews who, one can be sure today, were in fact helped by the Pope and his collaborators. Now, the raid itself lasted from 5 o'clock in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and 1,351 Roman Jews were arrested by the Nazis. It is important to stress that the raid took place not, as sometimes said and told, in the ghetto alone, but throughout the Eternal City. In fact, the present-day citizens of Rome, during their walks and promenades, are often reminded of the individual victims of this ghastly operation by small metal plaques cemented upon the cobblestones in front of the doors through which they were dragged away. Of the 1,351 that were arrested, and this is quite a remarkable phenomenon, 61 Jews managed somehow to escape before the convoy arrived in the Collegium Militare located in the Palazzo Salviate in Trastevere at the Via della Lungara. Of the remaining 1,290 arrested and kept in custody, a total of 249 Jews were released in the following hours and days. This, thanks to interventions of Pius XII and his collaborators, this adds up to about 20% of the total Jews arrested. Another 10 Jews were released for other reasons, we know, and one woman, Jewish woman, would be kept in custody and not deported, but alas was killed afterwards in 1944. Now, on the 18th of October 43, 1,030 Jews were deported and the train went to Auschwitz. Only 16 of these Jews survived the extermination camp. During the 9-month occupation of Rome by the Nazis, that is until 4th of June 1944, we can say that a total of 1,697, so almost 1,700 Jews were killed or murdered in various ways: detention, concentration camps, extermination camps, etc. And this number of 1,700, to make it easy, includes, of course, also the deported to Auschwitz. And from this group, only 117 Jews survived the war. A total of 235 convents, and that's another number which is interesting. We know today that 235 convents and monasteries served as hiding places for at least, the number today is 4,205 Jews that were hidden. An action to give them immunity status to these institutions was undertaken in order to avoid raids or unexpected intrusions from the Nazis. Written testimonies confirm that it was on the basis of the order of the Pope, and this is the second slide, to give shelter in the monasteries to those persecuted. And so the Jews were hidden in many convents and monasteries on command and order of the Pope. Altogether, Pius XII can be credited directly or indirectly with the rescue of about 2/3 of the Jews who were present in the city on the 4th of June 1944 at the end of the war. Of the 1,323 Jews in Rome who were helped to be before the raid of 16 October 43, Pope Pius XII and his collaborators, in calculation for today, rescued about 54% of them, so half of them. Now, let's turn back at that 16th October. That same day, interventions by Pope Pius XII and his collaborators took place to stop that raid. And this time, the Pope was not looking behind his window, doing nothing. The first thing was the ambassador of the Holy See. We heard it already. And the protocol of the conversation between Maglione and von Weizsäcker is known. We saw it. And it was an open clash with the Germans present in Rome. Carlo Pacelli, the nephew of Pius XII, was sent by the Pope to Stahel in Rome. Bishop Alois Houdal, as he wrote himself in this letter, contacted Stahel by phone. And who would doubt his words can find confirmation of them in our archives, in these transcripted letters and documents. Father Pancratius Pfeiffer, Salvatorian, did the same thing. Now, the result of all these interventions was an immediate stop of the deportation. That means at 2 o'clock, I told you, it took time, of course, to give the order to stop the raid, because it was all over the city. It was not only in the ghetto. And we know exactly how many minutes and hours, passed before the order reached the regiments that were active doing the raids. It should be pointed out that in Rome there was only one general raid and one deportation. Not as in other cities, many times there were successive 1, 2, 3, let's say, waves of deportation. Stahel paid for his behavior with his career. By the end of October, Stahel was